And thanks for staying up late with us for the Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Just hours ago, President Joe Biden made a nationwide televised address, which you likely watched right here on Fox 2. We're going to take a closer look at what he said in just a second here, but also making headlines in the political world. A controversial figure, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, addresses a joint session of Congress, a surprising request from former President Donald Trump. Another record-shattering day on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris, and a new warning about misinformation warfare. But of course, topping the show tonight, that televised nationwide address from the Oval Office, as President Biden spoke for the first time since bowing out of the 2024 race. He spoke about the state of the country and the reason he's stepping aside.
But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
Now, coming up in just about 10 minutes, our panel will join us to break down the other implications and takeaways from the president's address tonight in this historic week. But this next one, you can call a tale of two speeches. Hours before President Biden addressed the nation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to a joint session of Congress. His address comes as international tensions continue to rise surrounding the war in Israel and Gaza. Netanyahu vowing to win the war with Hamas, while also promising to get all of the hostages home.
The pain these families have endured is beyond words. I met with them again yesterday, and I promised them this: I will not rest until all their loved ones are home. Give us the tools, and we'll finish the job. Today, as Israel fights on the front line of civilization, I too appeal to America. Give us the tools faster, and we'll finish the job faster.
As you might expect, not everybody was thrilled to hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Like Detroit Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, stoically sitting there with this sign in her hand saying war criminal. Her silent protest, a much different scene than the protests held right outside, which were anything but silent. Protesters gathering to call for the U.S. to seize military support of Israel and end the war. U.S. Capitol Police said their officers were forced to resort to pepper spray when crowds refused to go. We're working to learn more about any arrests or serious injuries, although we know at least a handful of arrests were made at this scene. Turning now to the race for the White House and the road to November, and yet another record-setting day for new presumptive Democratic nominee Kamala Harris. Now, normally on a political show, you wouldn't expect to hear this, but we're about to show you a clip from the movie Mean Girls, and I promise this will make sense in just a second.
You're taking 12th grade calculus?
Yeah, I like math.
Ew, why?
Because it's the same in every country.
It's beautiful.
All right, the scriptwriter for Mean Girls might not exactly be the next Hemingway, but that line is actually surprisingly insightful. You see, the best way to understand a complicated story is by taking it by the numbers. So we're going to do just that. We're going to use some numbers to help paint a clearer picture of how fast and far this campaign has launched in just 3 short days. That stat, 700%, is really important because there was actually a 700% spike in new voters registered via vote.org on Monday and Tuesday alone. Let's dive a little deeper here. According to vote.org, 38,500 people signed up to vote for the first time in the 48 hours after President Biden said he's leaving. This, of course, does not include any additional registrations in the last 24 hours. That's actually the largest spike at any single time this election cycle. Of those new voters, a whopping 83% were from the age category of 18 to 34, which is the voting bloc most likely to remain undecided this late in the race. To add some context here, back in September, Taylor Swift encouraged all of her fans to register to vote. That spike was still a few thousand voters less than Harris. Now, right now, we are getting our first look at new polling data conducted after President Biden stepped down from the ticket at a potential Harris-Trump matchup in November. Now, here's the deal. There are 3 polls making headlines right now. I want to dive into one of them. A poll conducted Monday by Marist gives former President Trump just a 1% lead over Harris, 46 to 45. And a Morning Consult survey from the same day gives the former president 1 extra point. But then take a look at this survey. This is by Reuters. They say that Harris is leading former President Trump 44 to 42%. The big difference between this survey and the others, this is the only one that was conducted over 2 days. But how exactly can you trust polling data this early in the race? We spoke to Steve Mitchell, a nationally recognized pollster, to get his take. The early polling that we're seeing right now when it comes to Kamala Harris, the vice president, against Trump, what is that basically telling you?
The early polling is giving us some indication as to whether or not she is going to be a viable candidate. And at this point, she certainly looks to be. If you take a look at a comparison between how Donald Trump was doing against Joe Biden, he was leading nationally, according to the Real Clear Politics averages, by 3%. Against Kamala Harris, he's only leading by about 1.5 points.
What about the thirst that people have in certain very important demographics, like the Black community, women who weren't enthused to be voting for Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Doesn't this activate that voter base in a big way?
I think it does. I think it certainly activates women more than they've been activated. There's always been a gender gap in politics, which means traditionally more women vote for Democratic candidates than men vote for Republican candidates. This time it's been the exact opposite. We've seen more men voting for Republican candidates than women voting for Democratic candidates, and that's why Donald Trump has been leading. Now we'll have to watch and see whether or not the women really coalesce behind Vice President Harris and start her moving up in the polls.
Now, hearing from that pollster is awesome because Steve is amazing. But on this show, it's all about hearing from you. So we decided to hit the streets today to ask you about how Democrats might fare this November with Kamala Harris as their new nominee.
I think she's had experience being in the room where it happened, so to speak. So I'm kind of leaning on that, hoping that she's been able to get the necessary experience.
I think a lot of people would like what she has to, like what she's trying to do. I didn't like Biden in office. I don't like Trump in office either. Age-wise, she's like the best option, obviously.
I think that she has kind of been in the background, and I'm hoping to hear what more she has to say.
I think she did a lot before she came the vice president, and I think she'll continue on to do the sweep of improvements. I just think when she was the vice president, she couldn't do a lot because he was the president. So I think she'll continue on.
Do you think she can beat Trump?
Absolutely.
On the other side of the campaign trail, former President Donald Trump making kind of, well, an odd request. He says he spent a lot of money campaigning against President Biden, and now he wants that money back. The former president going on a bit of a posting spree, if you will, on his social media platform, Truth Social, basically saying he thinks Mr. Biden dropping out was all a conspiracy to cheat him out of campaign funding, but didn't provide any evidence to back that up. In the meantime, a story making headlines here at home, the tragic shooting death of Melvindale police officer Mohammed Saeed. Former President Donald Trump posting about the fallen officer, saying in part, 23-year-old Melvindale police officer Mohammed Saeed, a true American hero. The men and women of law enforcement deserve our respect for the selfless job that they do every day serving our communities. Pray for Officer Saeed, his family, and all of law enforcement. And I don't care if you bleed red or blue, we can all get on board with what the former president said there, as our thoughts are with the Saeed family. Well, turning now to a serious issue to watch for as this election cycle continues, the rapid rise of misinformation fueled by artificial intelligence. This blessing can be a curse. You see, first time we've talked about it. In fact, our Inside AI series explored how convincing these deep fakes can be and the threat they pose to our election system and really to democracy. And in just the past few hours, new headlines from Politico, from Mashable, Rolling Stone, and others point to a rapid surge in deepfakes on social media, particularly targeting Kamala Harris. A deepfake expert with Oakland University telling The Pulse, buckle up because you're likely going to see a lot more of these.
Do you think that fake news was bad in the last election? Wait for this one. You're going to see things and people are going to want to believe that they're true and they're going to be 100% fake. I like to say that sooner or later CNN is going to air something that's going to be 100% fake and the world's going to change on a dime. Be skeptical. You know, that's going to be your #1 defense. Be skeptical. You know, I saw a great meme on Facebook the other day. Treat every day as if it were April Fool's Day and have that kind of skepticalness.
Deal. At Fox 2, we check, we verify, we double check, we triple check, and we keep checking until we're convinced that it's the truth. Social media doesn't do that. Your neighbor doesn't do that. Good advice from that guy, though, and we have a lot more information about election misinformation on our website. Just go to fox2.com/InsideAI. But as this election cycle continues, you can bet you're going to see a lot more fake news out there, so stay tuned to Real News, what we do every night. That's where the Fox 2 Reality Check comes in. We're working for you and ready to help you vet the things that you see on social media. So if you see something on the internet and you're not sure it's legit, you can always contact us and send us the information. We can dive in and give it a reality check. We have 130 people who work at Fox 2. We're ready to do this. The fastest way to get in touch with us, email us at fox2newsdesk@fox.com. If you scan the QR code, your phone will open up your email app right now. Or you can always message us on any of your social media pages so we can help clear up any confusion and separate fact from fiction. You should be making your decisions based on fact, not what you see on Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. And hey, don't put your phone away. You might need it again in just a second. On The Pulse, we prefer people over pundits. So we asked you about the surge of deepfakes clogging the internet this week. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust information you see on social media? Right now, the average score, 3. Most people on board with understanding that, hey, everything I see on social media probably isn't true. If you want to add your voice to the conversation, all you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen. You can always find our online polls at fox2detroit.com/poll. Now on The Pulse, breaking down both the president's speech and its implications in the months ahead. Here to help us sift through it all, former Democratic State Representative Sherry Netanyahu, who also, by the way, was on that call with 40,000 women from across this country talking about Kamala Harris just the other day, was quoted in a national publication just today. And former GOP presidential candidate Perry Johnson, the man who's been in the room with the guy who everyone's talking about on the Republican side, former President Trump. I want to start there, Perry. We heard right away when Joe Biden said that he's leaving, the president said, I'm leaving. Right away, President Trump's first thing he says is Crooked Joe was never fit to be in office, and he never should have been there in the first place. Have we lost all decorum when a sitting president says, I'm going to bow out and do the right thing, and his opponent can't help himself but call him Crooked Joe?
Well, did he really do the right thing? You notice the article that we had in the Chicago Tribune talked about how it was the Obama team that actually came in and kind of forced him out, because we don't think that I don't think Biden really wanted to give up the presidency. I think that the forces behind the scene did. The 14 million voters that voted him as the nominee, I think, were not heard. What they're doing now is actually orchestrating it because they did not think Biden could win. So I think the position of that paper was that it was because they didn't think Biden would win that Obama and all of that organization got behind to pretty much coerce him out.
But isn't that politics in general on both sides of the political aisle? Haven't we seen that with Republican candidates where they know one person's viable, one person's not? I mean, isn't that legal? Isn't there anything wrong with that, right?
In our entire lifetime, this has never happened.
Well, this has never happened.
This has never happened. We've been, let's face it, we've been around for over 200 years, and we've never had a situation where a nominee who was elected by the people, who was then about to be the nominee, was then in a position where they dropped out. That's never happened.
We have had a president before who didn't seek a second term, like LBJ, who said, you know, I'm not going to do it.
Just before the people didn't vote him as the nominee.
Not so soon. Sherry, is this a bait and switch situation when you hear Republicans like Perry say this and Donald Trump say this, that it was just all this orchestration in order to get the presidency?
Absolutely not. I mean, I've been in several settings where I've had the opportunity to hear the president speak, see how swift he's been in his thought process, how he moves. Anybody with any reasonable sense can know that we're seeing some decline here. And as much as people wanted to support him going forward, which is why I believe it went as long as it did, and allow him to lead and make his own decision, at some point the people that care about you have to step in and really lift up the fact that this is not good. And so it wasn't just President Obama. It was Nancy Pelosi. It was Chuck Schumer. It was Hakeem Jeffries and several other Democrats that have been talking for a while saying it's time to step aside. They allowed him some time to come to the decision on his own. But yes, the pressure was building.
But listen, I got to tell you, our sources, we have sources within this president's inner circle that tell us that it was his sister, Valerie, his wife, Dr. Biden, his son, Hunter, and others who basically surrounded him 24 hours before he made the announcement and said, there's no path to victory. When you know that's true and you know that you're not in the best shape, maybe it's time. Let's move forward and fast forward a couple of days. A lot happens in this news cycle. Within a few hours, we learned that Kamala Harris would, of course, take the nomination. How quickly has this galvanized, would you say, African Americans and women in this country?
Unbelievable. On that call, it was, the numbers are now closer to what I'm seeing is 44,000 women. We don't know how many it was.
On that one call?
On that one call. And then there were other calls that patched people in that couldn't get on the call, because when it first started out, it was supposed to start at 8:30. People started dialing in at 8:25 and realized, whoop, it's 1,000, it's full. They did it again, it was 3,000.
What was the call? What happened on that call?
We went with black women. There were several bishops, pastors, female pastors across the country, congresswomen, activists, who were just basically charged up and speaking about this moment in time. There was prayers, several prayers that were on the call. There were messages from Donna Brazile, Maxine Waters, Maxine Beatty, Jasmine Crockett, several leaders across the country speaking about this opportunity in time and space. And you know what? It felt like a moment back in time. We will never know. I will never know what my foremothers and forefathers felt like. But I have to say that it felt like a historical movement while they were doing the Civil Rights era, doing the Underground Railroad, and just how passionate everybody was coming together to move in the direction of our Vice President.
Black Women is the name of the movement.
Absolutely.
Perry Johnson, there are so many conservatives out there that didn't want to see Kamala Harris in this seat. They would rather Joe Biden because they knew he was declining. Now Donald Trump has to go up against Kamala Harris, a prosecutor. Can he handle it?
Well, I do think he handle it. I think he will win, but I do think that.
But will he handle her in a debate, Perry?
I think he would debate anyone.
That wasn't the question.
But will he be able to win? Will he win a debate with Kamala Harris? Do you think he'll do well?
Yes, I do.
Why do you think that?
I think he's very sharp. He demonstrated how sharp he was in the last debate. He listened to everything that was said, responded eloquently. Everybody could clearly see the contrast between the two. The biggest issue you have is that for all this time, they were planning on Joe Biden. They never will make comments against Kamala Harris. They're pulling someone out, and now it's a totally new scenario.
But if he's running for president, what difference does it make who he's debating with if he's debating about his platform? The problem is he's anything but eloquent. He plays the dozens, and it's time out for that. The American people are looking for substance. They're looking for direction. They're looking for how we're going to save this country and move it forward.
But Sherry, when you look at how quickly this former president can pack a room, when you look at what happened in Grand Rapids, there are many people who may not live in the urban cores in the big cities, but who live in other places in middle America who are moved by this former president. Kamala Harris has a big fight ahead of her, doesn't she?
Oh, absolutely she does. But look at what she's done in Wisconsin. Look at what she's done. Raised over $100 million just since Sunday. You had not only a call with 44,000 women one night, but that was the black women, but there were others on there. Then you had the black men. Now you have a call with white women that are galvanized and moving together to make sure that they bring the vote together.
Keep in mind, no money was raised for a period of like 2 weeks. It might have been 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, but in 24 hours, 100 million is a pretty good shot.
Oh, yes, it is.
But you know that, Perry, because you've run for office. Last question goes to Perry real quickly here. Draw a contrast between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump without getting personal, just the policy. What is the reason that you believe that Americans will vote more for Trump than Harris?
Well, as a matter of fact, Trump has already proven that he can have a strong economy. It existed under him, without a doubt. We had no inflation under him. It existed. He controlled the borders under him. It existed. All these things that we're talking about that are main goals.
But he wasn't able to control the border completely, right? The wall was never built under his watch, as he promised.
It never got completed, but we had an increase of over 200%. Nobody can argue.
The border was a mess, right? And everyone knows that.
Nobody can argue that in 2019, median income in the United States was $79,500.
Caging children.
Nobody can argue that the median income is $4,000, approximately $3,800 less now. Nobody can argue we've had 20% inflation. These are facts, and nobody can argue that we had no inflation under President Trump.
This is going to be a fascinating, if it happens in September, debate between Harris and Trump, and I know that both of you will be watching it very closely. firstly, I want to thank the Perry and Sherry Show. Sherry and Perry, either way you want to call it, the Sherry and Perry Show.
The
Perry and
tough
Sherry
Democrat.
Show. Yeah, she is tough, and you're tough too. Good to see you, both of you. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, back now on the Pulse Live here, talking power, politics, and most importantly, people. You know, on this show, people fuel us. They drive our content. They drive the reason we do what we do. Last night, we interviewed Pastor Lorenzo Sewell, who spoke at the Republican National Convention. But one Pulse viewer had something to say about the praise that he had for President Trump. He reached out to me so he could sound off and add his voice to the conversation. You're on the Pulse tonight. You watched the Pulse last night, and you were just shaking your head at one of the interviews with Pastor Sewell. What did you not like about the interview?
Well, you know, he's giving his opinion, but at the same time, he was subliminally trying to push Trump's talking points. For example, he stated that this was really probably got to most people in Detroit when he stated that he thought most of the people in Detroit did not know Kamala Harris. That's what ticked me off, because how can we not know her? She's been a vice president for 4 years. So that's clearly, to me, a Trump talking point. But yet, at the same time, towards the end of the conversation, he tried to say that he was leaning one way or the other. He wasn't too sure. It's quite obvious. And then I'm not happy about the fact with the hoax that he pulled off a couple of weeks ago by having Trump come into his church saying he's speaking to a black audience, obviously predominantly white. I just need to know, does he really think his church is blessed? Because if it was, he would never let that happen.
What do you think about Vice President Harris as a potential president of the United States?
I'm ecstatic. What I think she's going to do, I mean, she's got I think she's going to use the mantra of the felon against the prosecutor. That would be good. I'm really glad that she's running for president, considering Biden's situation with his cognizance issues. So
do you think she's better than Joe Biden? Do you think she's better than the president?
To be honest with you, actually, no, because of the experience side of it. Biden is pretty well versed. He's got 40 years experience in Congress, you know, in politics. So I don't think she's that experienced, but she is definitely on the same page as he is, and she's going to be excellent. I think she win, especially for women and definitely for our democracy.
You don't like what you hear on this channel? You don't like what you hear on this show? Email me. That guy did, and he was on TV today. For this story and all of our other stories, we want to hear from you. You can always reach out to me directly by email. My address, roop.raj@fox.com, roop.raj@fox.com. Be patient, because we get a lot of emails, but I want to look at yours too. Feel free to hit me up on social media as well. The Pulse is all about people, and your voice is really important to me.